Welcome to Cryptid Monologues. Let's dive into a world where myths meet imagination. Here we unravel chilling tales of cryptids, Bigfoot, Wendigos, dogmen, skinwalkers, and more. These stories are crafted to ignite your imagination. These stories are purely fictitious, and names and/or events are purely coincidental. If you like these kind of stories, please give a like and subscribe. Click on the notification bell to stay up to date. Thanks for listening. Let's get into it. The mountain's sudden calm. At the USGS base camp near Mount St Helens, Dr. Anders reviewed the latest seismic and gas monitoring data with a growing sense of confusion. "Look at this," he said, gesturing to the laptop screen where a series of graphs displayed recent readings. CO2 emissions are dropping, SO2 levels are stabilizing, and those low-frequency tremors have almost completely subsided. One of his colleagues, a geophysicist named Dr. Layla Hammond, leaned over his shoulder. "That's a sharp reversal. Just a day ago, the data pointed to increasing instability. It doesn't make sense for everything to calm down this quickly without some kind of release." Anders nodded. "Exactly. If the system was pressurizing, we should have seen a minor eruption or at least more signs of activity. This sudden lull is unusual." Hammond glanced at the team's drone footage, still displayed on another screen. The fissures, gas vents, and other signs of geological stress remained visible, but nothing seemed to have progressed. "Do you think the system has temporarily stabilized?" "Maybe," Anders said, though his tone lacked certainty. "Or there's another factor at play that we don't understand yet." Later that afternoon, as the team continued to monitor the site, one of the field technicians returned from an inspection near the fumaroles. He seemed rattled. "Dr. Anders, you need to see this," he said, holding up a camera. The technician showed a series of photographs taken near the fissures. They revealed deep, jagged scratches along the rock surfaces, like the markings the team had noticed earlier, but more pronounced. "These weren't here yesterday," the technician explained, "and they're not natural. Something or someone made them." Anders frowned. "Could they be the result of rockfall or ground movement?" The technician shook his head. "No way. The patterns are too deliberate. It's like something was clawing at the rock." Hammond raised an eyebrow. "Are we dealing with vandals?" "Unlikely," Anders replied. "This area is remote, and we haven't seen any signs of unauthorized people out here. Let's document this and add it to the report." Despite his calm demeanor, Anders couldn't shake the unease growing in his gut. As the sun began to set, the base camp grew quiet. The team continued to analyze the data, but the once urgent atmosphere had shifted into uncertainty. Anders stared at a map of the region, his thoughts drifting back to Sarah's account of the creature. He dismissed it as folklore, an anecdote not worth pursuing. But now, with the strange scratches, the stabilizing activity, and the creature's reported presence aligning with the fault line, he wasn't so sure. "Layla," Anders said, breaking the silence, "do we have any historical records of unusual phenomena around Mount St. Helens before the 1980 eruption?" Hammond tilted her head, considering. "You mean geological phenomena?" "No, I mean accounts of strange animal behavior, unexplained sightings, anything that seemed out of the ordinary." Hammond looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll check the archives. It's a long shot, though." Anders leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the mountain's silhouette against the darkening sky. "Long shots are all we have right now." That night, the team continued their monitoring, but the readings remained stable. The mountain seemed to be in a strange state of equilibrium, as though the pressure beneath its surface had mysteriously dissipated. "This doesn't feel right," Hammond said, staring at the data. "Volcanoes don't just calm down without a reason." Anders nodded, his expression grim. "I agree. Either the system is repressurizing and we're in a temporary lull, or Something else is influencing it. The next morning, Hammond returned with historical records. "You're not going to believe this," she said, placing a thick binder on the table. "What did you find?" Anders asked, leaning forward. Before the 1980 eruption, there were multiple accounts of unusual activity in the surrounding forests. Park rangers reported strange noises, massive footprints, and sightings of an unknown creature. Locals claimed the forest felt different, like it was alive. Anders's brow furrowed. "And these reports stopped after the eruption?" Hammond nodded. "Completely. It's like whatever was happening disappeared after the mountain blew." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the team. "You don't think?" Hammond trailed off, glancing at Anders. He shook his head, unwilling to voice the thought, but in his mind the pieces were starting to align. The creature Sarah described, the strange markings near the fissures, the sudden stabilization of the mountain. It was as though something or someone had intervened. Anders stood, his resolve firming. "We keep monitoring the mountain, but we also start looking into these historical accounts. If there's even a chance that this creature is tied to geological activity, we need to understand it. The stability we're seeing now could be temporary, or it could be the calm before something much worse." As the team prepared to dive deeper into their investigation, the mountain loomed over them, silent but ever watchful. Whatever secrets it held, they knew time was running out to uncover them. The forest comes alive. The trio had ventured back into the forest to check the trail cameras and revisit the stone circle they had discovered. The air was damp, and the thick canopy muted the sounds of the world around them, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a bird. Sarah led the way, her thermal camera in hand, while Marcus and Elena trailed behind with their packs loaded with tools and supplies. "Trail cam should be just ahead," Marcus said, checking the GPS. As they approached the location, Sarah paused abruptly, raising a hand to signal silence. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. The others stopped, straining their ears. At first, there was nothing, just the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Then it came, a series of sharp, rhythmic knocks echoing through the forest. "Wood knocking," Elena murmured, her voice barely audible. "It's been reported in Bigfoot encounters before, supposedly a form of communication." Marcus frowned, scanning the area. Could be just falling branches or an animal messing with something. Before anyone could respond, another sound joined the knocks, a low guttural murmur that sent chills down their spines. It wasn't human, yet it sounded almost like speech. "Is that chatter?" Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. The strange vocalizations continued, fluctuating in pitch and tone. It was as if multiple entities were speaking in a language they couldn't comprehend. Elena grabbed the audio recorder from her pack and pressed record. "This is incredible. If we can document this, it might be the breakthrough we need." The knocks and chatter seemed to grow louder, as though whatever was making the sounds was moving closer. Sarah raised her thermal camera, scanning the dense foliage. "There's movement," she whispered, pointing to the screen. "About 50 yards out, multiple heat signatures." "How many?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "3, no, 4, Sarah replied. "They're staying just out of sight." Marcus tightened his grip on the bear spray. "I don't like this. It's one thing to track a creature, it's another to have it track us." "We're not running," Sarah said firmly. "This is our chance to observe. Just stay calm." Elena nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the audio recorder's settings. The sounds continued, a mix of knocks, chatter, and occasional low growls. Suddenly, one of the heat signatures moved closer, stopping just beyond the edge of visibility. Sarah froze, her eyes glued to the thermal camera. "It's watching us again." Then, as quickly as the sounds had started, they stopped. The forest fell into an eerie silence. "Why did it stop?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a loud crack echoed through the trees, followed by a thud. They turned to see a large branch lying on the ground, freshly snapped and still quivering. "Okay, that felt intentional," Marcus said, his voice tense. Elena glanced at the branch, then back into the forest. "We might be too close to something they don't want us to find." Sarah frowned, her mind racing. "Or it's a test. We don't know enough about how they communicate to say for sure." The trio decided to retrieve the trail cam footage and retreat to a safer location. As they made their way back to the cabin, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once inside, they reviewed the footage from the trail cam. To their astonishment, it had captured several blurry but distinct figures moving through the trees. "They're massive," Marcus said, pausing the video on a frame showing a shadowy figure nearly twice the height of a human. "And look at the way they move," Elena added. "Not like a bear or any other known animal. This is something entirely different." Sarah leaned back, her mind racing. Between this footage, the audio, and the thermal readings, we're building a case. But we need to figure out why they're so active now. Is it because of the geological shifts or something else? Elena nodded. "We also need to decide how far we're willing to push this. If they're intelligent and see us as a threat, we could be in real danger." The trio sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them. The creatures were real. Of that they were certain. But their motives in connection to the mountain remained a mystery. And as the night deepened, the distant sound of wood knocks echoed faintly through the forest. A reminder that they were far from alone. The next morning, the forest seemed almost unnaturally serene. The trio awoke to the soft chirping of birds and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Gone were the strange knocks, guttural chatter, and ominous growls. The forest felt normal. Elena stood on the cabin's porch, sipping her coffee as she stared out at the dense greenery. The tension that had gripped her for days was slowly easing. "It's quiet," Marcus said, joining her with his own mug. "Too quiet, maybe. Or maybe things are just returning to how they were," Elena replied. "No signs of seismic activity, no strange sounds. It's like the mountain and whatever was out there have decided to rest." Sarah emerged from the cabin, her thermal camera hanging from her shoulder. "I scanned the area this morning. Nothing, not even the faintest heat signature. Whatever we encountered, it's gone." Marcus sighed. "Do you think it's because the mountain stabilized? Like the creature knew its job was done?" Elena shrugged. "If it's connected to the mountain, and I think it is, that's a possibility. Maybe it only appears during times of geological upheaval, to warn, to guard, who knows?" Back inside the cabin, the trio gathered their collected evidence: the trail cam footage, the audio recordings, and Sarah's thermal images. "It's compelling," Elena said, reviewing the footage again. "But without more encounters or physical evidence, it's still not definitive. And the fact that it's gone now makes it even harder to prove," Marcus added. Sarah frowned, flipping through her notebook. "We might not be able to prove anything conclusively, but we've documented enough to make people ask questions. Maybe that's enough to keep the conversation alive." They agreed to compile their findings into a report, one they could share discreetly with trusted scientists and researchers. They knew their evidence would be met with skepticism, but it was too significant to keep to themselves. Over the next few days, life around Mount St Helens seemed to return to normal. Hikers and tourists returned to the trails, oblivious to the events that had unfolded in the forest. The USGS team reported that the volcanic activity had subsided, labeling it as a minor episode of unrest. The trio, however, couldn't shake the feeling that they had witnessed something extraordinary and deeply tied to the mountain's very essence. "I guess this is it," Sarah said, as they packed up the cabin on their final day. "Back to our regular lives." Marcus grinned. "Regular lives that now include the knowledge that Bigfoot, or something like it is real. Elena smiled faintly, and that it might be more than just a creature. It's part of this place, part of its rhythm. And when the mountain stirs again, maybe it will too. As they drove away from the cabin, the trio took one last look at the towering peak of Mount St Helens, its snow-capped summit gleaming in the sunlight. The forest and the mountain were quiet now, their secrets tucked away once more. But as the wind swept through the trees, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, was it really gone? Or was it simply watching, waiting for the day the mountain would stir again? For now, the mystery of the creature and its connection to the mountain remained unresolved, a quiet reminder of the unknown forces that still lingered in the wild corners of the world. Thanks so much from Cryptid Monologues for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. And hey, while you're here, check out these videos. You'll definitely love them. See you in the next one.